Hello and welcome back to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I am Helen, and we are well and truly into the spooky season, being halfway through the month of October. And at the start of October I took part in the Monster Mash Readathon that was hosted by Hannah Blackwell, and I thought I'd share with you exactly how I got on. So the Monster Mash took place between the 1st and 10th of October, and it was organised by Hannah Blackwell, and she had some amazing co-hosts as well that helped her out during the readathon, and they were Honest Fiction, The Book Refuge, Maggie's Books and Stuff, B and Daphne, and Ava's Romance Books. So thank you very much to all of the hosts. I had an absolutely fantastic time, and I had a strategy going into the Monster Mash Readathon. I wanted to make sure I hit a bingo, but I wasn't going for a complete board wipeout because I knew that I only had 10 days to read as many monster books as I could, and I normally only average sort of one book every 2 days, so I knew I was only going to read the maximum between 4 and 5 books during that time. I also had some friends visiting us for the weekend in the middle of the Monster Mash, so I knew that would also limit the amount of time I could spend reading. So I ended up putting 4 monster romances on my TBR and picking specifically to make sure that I hit a bingo. So I chose to come down diagonally down the bingo board from the top left to the bottom right, and I needed to make sure that I read a witch romance, a romance with a snake, one with a gargoyle, and one with an orc. And then because I came through the middle, I had a free space that I could utilise. So that was my strategy. So I'm pleased to say that I did manage to read all 4 books. I actually only needed to read 3 of them to actually get my bingo, because the first book I read actually had a witch in it, which I didn't realise going in. I thought it was just going to be a gargoyle romance, but nevertheless I wanted to make sure that I finished all 4 books that I'd committed to reading, and so that's what I'm going to share with you today, exactly what I thought of those books, and also how I made my way down the bingo board. So the first book that I picked up was Getting It On with Gargoyles by Hazel Mack, and I'd had this one on my TBR for a while because Hazel Mack also writes under the pen name of Anna Fury, and I love Anna Fury's books. She has written sort of a Makeverse and sort of dark romances to date. So like I said, I'd had my eye on it for a while, and I thought it was a perfect opportunity to read this since I needed to read a book with a gargoyle in it, and so Getting It On with Gargoyles was obviously the perfect choice. So this is book 1 in the Haven Ever After series, and currently there's 2 books out in the series, and the 3rd one comes out later on in October. And this first one is a sweet small town gargoyle romance, and in it we are following Thea and Shepherd. Thea is one of triplets, and unfortunately they've recently lost their parents, and one of Thea's sisters has found a magical map in an antique shop, and she is obsessed with this map, and on the map is a town called Haven, and she convinces her 2 sisters that they should go on a bit of a road trip to find this town. So they agree to go with her for a weekend sort of girly getaway, and they are driving around for quite some time because they cannot seem to find this place, until eventually they're nearly out of gas and they stop at a gas station which happens to be owned by a gargoyle, and he spots Thea. Straight away she goes into the shop to sort of buy a few bits and to pay for the fuel, and he spots her and he recognises her straight away that she's his mate. But of course he also realises that she doesn't know anything about the supernatural world, and that he is a gargoyle. However, he sees that they've got this magical map, and he decides that he's going to help them find the town of Haven, because of course it is a magical map and the town of Haven is a magical place, and it's one of the reasons they've had trouble finding it. So basically Shepherd, who is our gargoyle, he directs the sisters into the town of Haven, and magically a road appears and they find themselves in the town of Haven. Now this very much reminded me of that TV show A Town Called Eureka, where all of the inhabitants of the town are all geniuses, yet they continue to you know, do sort of everyday jobs, like, you know, run the coffee shop and run the B&B and be another sort of mechanic in town. And this town of Haven is no different, because it's filled with magical creatures, pixies, trolls, vampires, and of course gargoyles, and they are all, you know, running their own businesses. So there's somebody who looks after the sweet shop, there's someone who looks after the local B&B, there's someone who looks after the local cafe, and of course Shepherd himself, who runs the town's sort of gas station. So it is really, really sweet, it's really fun, it was a delightful read, I really, really enjoyed it, and it's reasonably low angst from a romance perspective, because pretty straight away they don't try and hide the magical elements of this town in any way. They're kind of very open with the sisters, they explain who they are, the monsters in the town, and not only that, but they've kind of been summoned there by the keeper of the town, the person who kind of like looks after it and keeps it safe by putting up some wards, and he happens to be the mate of one of the sisters. However, he's not too happy about it, and he isn't particularly nice. Now we're expecting that they're going to get their own book in the future, so it'll be interesting to see how he comes around, but for this particular book, the general gist is that because these sisters have turned up, they've somehow disrupted the magical wards, and now there are some there's some baddies outside of the walls that they're kind of the town have been keeping out, and now somehow they're able to get into town. So it's how the sisters work with the townsfolk to basically reinforce the walls, make the town safe again, and also during their stay there, they kind of fall in love with the town, fall in love with the inhabitants, and of course Thea and Shepherd absolutely get their romance and get to explore their time together. So like I say, it was absolutely a delightful read, really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars, and I absolutely will be going on to read the other books in the series because it was just really, really good fun. So highly recommend. So then after that, I decided I was going to try and tick off my snake square, and picked up Viper by Naomi Lucas. Now this was another book that had been on my TBR for ages. I was quite interested in this one, and so this was a perfect opportunity to pick it up. So while this, although obviously it's a viper, so it's basically a snake with humanoid sort of features, sort of torso, but with obviously a snake-like tail. So it is a monster romance, but it's also, you know, sort of a sci-fi romance as well. So the premise of this one is that these snakes are the caretakers of Earth. They're living on Earth, and humans had long since left the planet, and in fact they left it uninhabitable, so they could no longer live there, and they'd kind of made a new home, you know, in the stars, as it were. But now they have encountered a new enemy, and they need to go back to Earth to retrieve some of the technology that was left behind when they first had to abandon the planet. And so they've sent a team of people down to the planet to try and retrieve some of this technology. Now the snakes know where this technology is, and they've kind of been, they don't really use it, but they've kind of been guarding it for a while. But the other problem is that the snakes have no females, so they're not able to have relationships or produce offspring, because something happened in their past where all their females either died in childbirth or have chosen to leave the particular place where they're at. So all of these snakes in this particular area don't have any women. So when they see human women, they decide that they're going to do a deal with the humans and say, give us your women, in exchange we'll give you some technology. And of course the male humans decide that's a great deal and hand over the women and pretty much, you know, throw the women to the wolves. Now there's 2 women in particular, a heroine in this one who is Gemma, and she's also got a friend called Daisy as well, and so they kind of get, like, you know, chucked out of the camp that they're in and left to fend for themselves. And obviously there's more snakes than humans, because we've only got 2 women at this point, and the snakes also do a deal amongst themselves to say, what we'll do is we will give the human females a head start, they can start to run, and we will hunt them, and the hunter who catches the female first will get to keep her. And the viper snake in this one, Vrushka, he has absolutely got his eyes set on Gemma. He is a red snake and she's got red hair, and he sees this as a sign that she belongs to him. And of course he absolutely ensures that he chases her down and wins the hunt and wins her. Now lots of other stuff go down, but of course this is a monster romance, so they do start a relationship together, but all is not as it seems on this planet. We find out a little bit more about what made the humans have to leave the planet in the first place, what is the technology that they're hiding, and also we're starting to suspect that the reason that the snakes are there, or even evolved to be kind of these humanoid snakes, something isn't quite right about that either. We're also introduced to some other characters, some other snakes that we're introduced to, as well as a villainous snake who is the Death Adder, and I am absolutely intrigued about him and looking forward to seeing him get his own relationship. I think that's book 4, so I absolutely will be going on to read more books in that series because I absolutely loved it, so would highly recommend. So then I went on to read Games with the Orc by Kathryn Moon, and this is book 1 in her Monster Smash Agency series. I was very intrigued by this one. I heard some good things about it, and essentially the concept here is that the human that we're following, Sunny, she is just split up with a long-term boyfriend because basically he was boring and predictable, and she wanted a bit of excitement in her life, and particularly she wanted the opportunity to explore some of her sexual fantasies, and her best friend convinces her to sign up to the Monster Smash Agency, where essentially there are monster sex workers who can basically deliver on any kind of fantasy that you have, and so basically she writes a list of all the fantasies that she's ever had, and in particular she's very attracted to orcs. And she basically buys or pays for 5 days with an orc to enact out all of her sexual fantasies during that time. And so essentially what happens is our heroine Sunny meets Kellar, who is an orc who's been working at this agency for a long time, and is very proficient and skilled at what he does. The thing is, he starts to have more feelings for her than maybe he should. And when orcs choose a mate, they mate for life, and he knows that if he succumbs to his feelings and wants to mate her, then he'll also have to lose his job. He'll end up having to give up his job because he will no longer be able to be a sex worker if he's got a mate, because that's not what orcs do, obviously. Now obviously Sunny also develops feelings for the orc, but they are, you know, only supposed to be together for 5 days. She has paid for a service, and so although it feels to her that they're getting very intimate and close, she doesn't know how much of that he's acting, because he's paid to obviously be her partner. And so at the end of the 5 days they do go their separate ways, but are ultimately drawn back to each other because ultimately they are fated mates, and this is a romance, so they do get their happy ever after. Now I only rated this one 3 stars, so while I did like it, I didn't absolutely love this one. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was a good sort of premise, but if I'm being really honest, I was a little bit bored. There is not a lot of substance to the plot, and not a lot happens, and quite a big portion of the plot is obviously seeing them enact Sunny's sexual fantasies, and so normally I would absolutely be up for that sort of thing. Wouldn't faze me at all, but for some reason I felt it was all a little bit lackluster. I was a little bit bored while reading it, and I didn't 100% buy into their relationship with each other, or really see what their attraction was to each other either. Like I said, I did enjoy it, gave it 3 stars, but wouldn't like kind of rave about this one. And then the last book that I picked up was Lifeblood by Amara Rae, and this was specifically to tick off my witch square, because in this one the main character is a witch, and that is Colette. And she has a relationship with a warlock called Mack. Now I've been wanting to read this book again for a while. It is one of a series of 6, although only 5 are currently available in the series, and it kind of revolves around a witch's coven, and there are kind of 6 females in this witch's coven who kind of are the leaders of the coven, and therefore they all get their own story. But in this one we are following, like I say, Colette. She is kind of a life witch, and she is responsible for making sure that the wards are secure around their territory to prevent any kind of like enemies getting in and hurting anyone inside their territory. And she is also able to heal, so she's sort of a healer, which basically means she mainly has defensive capabilities and not very many offensive capabilities, and so she is vulnerable when it comes to a fight, and she relies very much on her witchy sisters who have more offensive sort of powers when it comes to a fight. Now what we know is that this witches coven is very, very powerful, and they're kind of the head witch coven outside of the actual kind of like leaders of the witches, if you like, that are run by the elders. But they're also a group of hybrid witches, which means that they their parents came from other paranormal creatures. And in Colette's case, her father was a warlock. Now you think, okay, well, witches and warlocks, surely they go together. But actually in this sort of scenario, witches and warlocks are actually mortal enemies, and they don't mix at all. So the fact that she's got a witch mother and a warlock father makes her a hybrid, and is very frowned upon in the witch community. So then this is what sets the plot up for this book, because there is a warlock clan, coven, whatever you want to call them, who are trying to take down the witches, and they decide that they are going to kidnap Colette because she's the one that reinforces the wards, and they think if they can kidnap her, they can torture her out of information so that they could bring the wards down and then basically attack the rest of the coven. And the person that's sent to kind of pick her up, kidnap her, capture her and torture her is Mack, who is a warlock. But of course what they find out is they are in fact fated mates, and they need to be together, and so it's a story about how he tries to come to terms with the fact that the woman he is supposed to be torturing for information is actually his mate, and will he actually end up hurting her, will he be able to hurt her, and what's going to happen. So again, I really like the premise of this book. I think the series has got great potential. It's a really great start and a foundation to the rest of the series. But again, I only rated this one 3 stars. A couple of things that meant that I didn't really give it 4 or 5 stars was I felt the beginning part of the book was quite confusing to read. The author had taken a lot of time to try and explain how the world worked and all the different clans and how it all worked, and I just found it a little bit confusing, a little bit chaotic, and I never really kind of 100% got into the book. I never really bought into Colette's and Mack's relationship or their chemistry between each other, and so I was left a little bit disappointed. Again, I would describe this one as a little bit lackluster when it came to the romance. And like I say, while I was intrigued with the story, I think it's got great potential. As we learn more about this paranormal kind of like world and community, then I think it will get very, very interesting. So like I say, I think this first one is a solid foundation, but didn't blow me away, unfortunately. So there we have it. This one is fairly short and sweet. Well, at least I hope it will, because I've only talked about 4 books, although by now you'll know that I can absolutely talk for England about the books that I read. So I just want to say again, thank you very much to Hannah Blackwell and all of the amazing hosts that hosted the Monster Mash Readathon. I really had a great time, got me in the mood definitely for the spooky season, gave me some other series that I'm going to be chipping away at over the coming weeks and months. So if you also got involved in the Monster Mash Readathon, let me know how you got on, if you got yourself a bingo and some of your favourite reads from the readathon, and pop that down in the comments box below. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. That's all we'll go on to do, you know, and this is book 1 in her when these humans turn up, and right, so the monster romance, no, it wasn't a monster romance. Monster Mash, the Monster Mash.